Hi, welcome back to Redesign for All. Today we're going to be doing another review of planned improvements, this time to the Esplanade and Mill Street in Toronto. Not only is this an important connection in the cycling network, but we'll see how well primed this area already is for a focus on walking and cycling. This is an area that will benefit from these changes immediately. This is also a three-phase project that has already seen the first phase implemented. I'll try to get on a ride at some point to check out the changes so far and the area where changes are still yet to happen. So with that, let's get to the plans. All right, so this map shows the area that we're looking at. And as I did say, like some of this area has already been done, it's been constructed, so we'll talk about that. But you can see the connection that this makes. It's a really important one. To the east side on here, we have the Don River, which is anytime you have a physical feature like a river, that will act as kind of a barrier. So you see a lot of north-south cycling tracks along there that kind of come and turn, and there will be a decent amount of usage along that trail. Then running east-west, it connects to a number of existing and future planned connections going north and south. So that includes Cherry Street, which will receive some pretty significant connections down south to the new development in that area. Parliament Street with a future connection. Sherbourne Street right now I actually covered an intersection on Sherbourne Street in a previous video. And that's a pretty strong cycling route. So having a connection there will be really important. Jarvis Street is eventually supposed to connect down to the lake. Church Street, and then an important one that I wanted to touch on where this ends is Yonge Street. Now, it is kind of unfortunate this street doesn't extend further west, but having that connection at Yonge Street will be important. Right now, there are bike lanes that connect it to the waterfront. It'd be nice to see those improved in the future. But the other important thing is that further north of here, north of Bloor, there are bike lanes currently under a pilot that might be made permanent soon. That extend just to Bloor, and I believe the plans eventually will be to extend them down to the waterfront, as you can kind of see here, and that would make that a pretty strong connection to be able to come down south and take it to, say, the Distillery District or other destinations that are along here as a connection. So this is a really important connection. The neighborhood already has, as you'll see in some of the future slides, very strong walkability. It's an interesting place. So I think this will be a pretty strong connection to have. All right, here's a little bit of detail about the scope. So I want to talk first about the left image, working within curbs. This is, from what I can tell, this is how the city approaches many things when there's no real work being done already on the street. It's a way to quickly implement cycling facilities where you're not tearing the street up and that kind of thing. And from that point of view, it is a good approach. It's a good way to get things in quickly. And so we will see some of these kind of elements that you see here, which are not always the most necessarily aesthetically pleasing and that kind of thing, but do really work to increase safety and walkability and everything. One thing that I often find with these constructions in Toronto is often they can be very narrow for cyclists. So it's very hard to pass, which is not ideal, especially when there's big stretches. Now, you'll see in this section, much of this section is a two-way cycle path on one side of the street. And so that could be helpful in that situation to still provide some extra space and allow people to pass. So that's good to see. And then on the right, you see there's a park, which you'll see in it, that will undergo some revitalization that's also interconnected with this path, which is really interesting. All right, and this is a little bit of what I was talking about. This area, I mean, for Toronto, this is very impressive, right? There's the percent of people that drive is very low compared to the rest of the city. So you already have a really good base of people who are primed for cycling, even if they don't now. 6% is actually decent for Toronto. But even if they don't do it now, the fact that they're walking and taking transit now will mean I think they're more primed and will easily jump on a bike if safe facilities are made available. So this is really exciting to see, and it shows why this area, should get this treatment, even if the roads aren't being ripped up and all that stuff. It's better to put something in here because the potential it could be huge for this area. So I think that was important to point out. Here's another important element. I skipped by some of the slides that showed that there's a lot of development and a lot of reconstruction in the area, which makes this, again, an important project. But there's also the consideration of the new Ontario line, which is a new rapid transit line planned for the area. And you can see Mill Street, the street in question, is right along here. It would have been nice if they had highlighted it, but you can see it along here. And then you have a stop just north of that, right, basically in the middle of the whole thing, and then a stop that will be at the end. So again, this could be a really important connection to transit. And I think one thing I want to talk about more on this channel, possibly in a future video, is how cycling has huge potentials to connect people to rapid transit lines. It can be a huge function to solving that problem of what they call first mile, last mile, meaning you might have a rapid transit line, but if people don't live directly along it, how do you get people to it? And cycling tends to be the perfect speed to do that. So you can envision someone taking the subway to one of these points and then cycling, or vice versa, right? If they live along here, cycling to the station, really easy now that they have a safe way to do so, and then be able to take the train in if they're going longer distances. So this is another really exciting element of this. An element about what's around this area, because I really think what makes these projects important are the things that you can get to along it. A transportation corridor is only as important as what you can get to by it. So you have Union Station on one side, and I talked about connections to transit. The area actually starts out where the old Union Station bus terminal was. It's now been relocated, but it's kind of right on the edge of Union Station. So you can see another connection there. It goes right by St. Lawrence Market, so this is really important. That's a huge open market, indoor open market that will see some renovations. But it's really important because people don't get to St. Lawrence Market by car generally. So this will be another way people can get there very easily. Local residents can easily stop by to do shopping. I'll link to another video that shows how easy shopping can be by bike. It's something that I think we don't think of quite often. And then also a lot of people know of the Distillery District, which has a great Christmas market. It's a pedestrianized space, so there's no really through vehicles or other than utility vehicles and that stuff. It's a great pedestrian space. So this area, again, I just wanted to reinforce, it's so primed for these kinds of changes. It's very primed to focus on walking and cycling. I think this is important. The conditions right now, at least for cycling, there's not much, right? It's on-road conditions. I will say that the roads are not necessarily the most high speed, but they're still, I think, too daunting for a lot of vulnerable cyclists that won't want to share it with buses, won't want to share it with... So as you can see, one concern here is that people are using what they would normally look at as local streets, like the Esplanade, as through traffic, right? Which is not what you want. I think one example that's already in place that helps with that is this right here. And you can see this is actually a park, and there's a path that connects the Esplanade through Mill Street right there. And that will prevent vehicles from moving through. Now, it looks like the point here is that it's still an issue, but you could think about how much worse this would be. And so by using this, what we call filtered permeability, we can allow cyclists and pedestrians to use this as a throughway, but not cars. And then we keep traffic volumes down. So this is a good contrast to what I talked about in a previous video where I did something similar at a different area. The area I did before, which was the Queensway, was really wide. And so that gave you an opportunity to kind of like, if you wanted, you can accommodate pretty much everybody. Going, the optimal speeds and that kind of thing. It's a different case in this area, right? They show here, there's 20 meters required to fit all desired users, right? Now that does include like 2 lanes of traffic, plus parking, plus cycling, plus walking, and storefront. So that's interesting. I mean, you can say what it's a bit of a judgment call as to what's required to fit all uses. You could say, is 2 lanes of parking really required? But that's what it really comes down to, is value judgment, right? What do we think we should be getting space to? In a lot of these areas, you can see them at the top, but it's like 9 to 11 meters. So it's literally, when I look at the Queensway video and the section that I looked at, this is like a third of that. So we really have to make decisions about how we use the space effectively. What's being proposed and what's been implemented so far is a 2-directional cycle path on one side of the street. And so this is to obviously have that buffer and take into account the sides of the road. Now, I wanted to look at a little bit of their reasoning for using the bi-directional cycle path. And I think these kind of make sense. The one thing I don't see is the consideration for, is it a safe way to implement? I talked about this in a previous video, but you do need to be careful when implementing bi-directional cycle trails, because if there's too many crossroads, driveways, those types of things, it can get dangerous, more dangerous than if you had cycle paths on each side. These blue back and forth are the cycle tracks that will go bi-directional, and then we have the other lanes of traffic. And we can see that for a lot of this, there should be unimpeded cycling facilities on that side with limited crossroads and different things, especially once you get to about Jarvis. You can see a lot of this is park space and green space. I'm making a little bit of assumption. I don't know the area as well as some of the stuff I've talked about before, so I could be a little bit wrong, but my understanding is this is pretty consistent with the fact that there's not huge amounts of driveways in this area. So that will help, and they definitely, if you're going to do it, they've picked the right side. I think the south side makes the most sense, as it has the least amount of crossroads and conflicts. The other thing to note is there are some areas that will be bus-only lanes. So these will serve 2 functions. One is obviously it speeds up the bus. There are problems in the area with the bus being quite a bit slowed down by traffic, and so we can see these areas that will serve as bus only. It's including this way, which is only bus. So this section of the road will not have cars, personal vehicle cars at all in it. But the other thing, the other function that it serves is, again, it's making sure that vehicles only use this area if they need to, not as a throughway, right? Which was a concern we saw. So this helps. Vehicles can't really go through. They can use a section of the area, and then they'll have to turn off of it. Similar, if you know, to sections of King Street. And so that will really prevent vehicles from wanting to use it as a through lane. It doesn't really make sense for them anymore. You see the two-way cycle track on the south. The one thing that I don't notice and I don't see in a lot of these are facilities for cyclists to manage the intersection. Ideally, especially because this is a bi-directional cycle track, you would want to see protected intersections. And I think because this is a temporary, or I shouldn't call it temporary, but we're waiting for a larger infrastructure project likely to do more permanent elements. That might be why we see this, but it can still be very dangerous. And putting two-way cycle tracks without any type of protection, it just hopefully there's not too many conflict points. The fact that they're reducing the amount of vehicles will definitely help. So that's the one positive. Taking away vehicle traffic will obviously also reduce conflict points. But we can see consistently that two-way cycle track on the south. And they are bending the cycle track in that way to improve those sight lines at those conflict areas. And that is one way to do things when vehicles are turning out. So in some degree, that's a protection. I would say when you look at like best practices from places like the Netherlands and stuff, they would have done likely the opposite and try to build the buffer on the other side. But you do have some sightline problems, which I think is why they're doing that. You can see from the picture where it might be hard to see around corners and that type of thing. So this will be all one-way traffic, so that's actually a good mix with the two-way cycle traffic, because again, just less conflict points. Continuing, you then have a two-way section. Again, no intersection treatments that I can see. And then you get to this area where, again, this is the area where you have no or limited through traffic. I believe you do have one direction here, and then this section will be bus only, which is interesting to see. And this will be in front of the St. Lawrence Market area, which, as I mentioned, will see significant changes and reconstruction over the next little while. So yeah, not much else to say about that. Restricting some turning movements because of this, which again, all those things help a lot for reducing conflict. And then the section continuing east, we see these dedicated bus areas that will effectively, again, reduce the amount of vehicles through the area, because they can only go in one direction basically, but it allows the buses to move in both directions. And then continuing east, you have another section. This is a section where there will be no vehicles at all. One other thing to note is there are a lot of four-way stops. And in terms of if you've cycled before, having to come to a stop frequently is not the most ideal solution, which is why you get problems with cyclists not stopping at stop signs a lot. It can be really tedious and really uncomfortable to have to do that a lot. So it would be nice to see, given a priority given one way or another, and use, yield signs and traffic calming a little bit more to slow down traffic and be able to manage that a little bit better. So this might look a little bit chaotic, but this is how you control high vehicle speeds and high vehicle traffic in an area like this, right? You still allow access for people that need to get here, but you make it inconvenient for people to use as a thoroughfare, because that's not the purpose of this street. This will improve facilities for cyclists, pedestrians a lot. It'll make it a far more enjoyable and safe environment to walk and cycle in, and people do still have access to it if they need to drive, because they have a purpose, they live there, all those different things. There's still access to it, but it's not encouraged. It's the area where the bike lanes will pass through a park, and so this is kind of how it looks. The actual park, I've been calling the whole thing a park, but the actual park is just mainly on the south side, and the north side is actually, it is a green pea parking, so that will remain, but the point is there is no through movement through the area still. And so you see the transition will be to have that cycling path go between the parking and the park. I don't believe there's anything that's there now, so currently you have to use this multi-use path here, which is an okay solution. Multi-use paths can have the problem when they're very busy of being just too hard to navigate, or too inconvenient to navigate for cyclists, and just not a very pleasant experience. So I think when this cycle track comes along, it'll improve things quite a bit as a throughway. And then on the east side, because there's a bit of a misalignment with the continuation of the street, the cycle path will have to come down and meet it here. It's more of the same, so I won't be going through this in too much detail, but it's the same general concepts. You have the cycle path to the south, and then vehicle lanes to the north of them, with some alternating one-way directions in order to control traffic through the area. The one thing I did want to mention was the connection on Cherry Street. So as you saw before, Cherry Street is a cycling route right now. It will have improved conditions to the south of here. So there are bike boxes planned to help facilitate that. Again, as I've mentioned, I would like to see something a little bit more. It would be nice to see actual protected intersections, because bike boxes just often aren't the safest. They leave cyclists exposed in a lot of cases. So that would definitely be nice to see in the future is to see the protected intersections. As you can see, right turns on red are being restricted, which is really important anytime you have pedestrians or cyclists. Those right turns on red can be really dangerous for them. So talking about implementation, this is the section I believe that has been done now. So I'm gonna try to give it a ride in a future video and see what it looks like, as well as, you know, the future planned area. And you can see some of the proposed adjacent improvements to that section. And then scheduled for later this year will be the extension further west along the Esplanade, in line with the work that's being done on St. Lawrence Market. And so there you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm going to try to get out at some point and bike this area so you can see it within the context itself, what has been done, what's still to be done. So yeah, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell, comment if you have something you'd like to comment on. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.